Have you ever wondered why a man will walk away from a woman he describes as crazy as storm too much, only to find that his soul in the silent hours of the night secretly plots a return? Most women are taught to be manageable, to be the peace in a man's life, not the war within it. You are taught to be the answer, not the unanswerable question. But some women are, by their very nature, a catalyst. They are not born to soothe the ego, but to shatter it. The man who encounters such a woman is not meeting a partner, he is meeting a reckoning. He is meeting his own underdeveloped soul, mirrored in her untamable feminine energy. He may build a new life, find a woman who is calm, predictable, a safe harbor. He may convince himself and the world that he has escaped the chaos. But the ghost of the woman who dismantled his reality lingers. It is not a ghost of memory, but a ghost of potential, a phantom of the man he almost became in her fire. This isn't a story about conventional love. It is a story about psychological alchemy. A man builds his life like a fortress, with walls of logic, routine, and control. His ego is the king of this fortress, a ruler who despises surprises and demands predictability. He wants a partner who will be a respectable queen within these walls, one who follows the rules of his carefully constructed kingdom. Then she arrives. This woman does not ask for entry. She is a force of nature that erodes the very foundations of his fortress. Her emotions are not neat and tidy, they are tidal. Her intuition bypasses his logic. Her presence doesn't just challenge his rules, it reveals his kingdom as a gilded cage. He calls her crazy because his ego has no other word for what it cannot categorize, command, or control. Her craziness is simply her authenticity, a wild, untamed spiritual energy that refuses to be domesticated by his fear. You see, for a man whose identity is deeply enmeshed with his ego, his achievements, status, his ability to remain unshaken, this woman is a profound threat. She doesn't see the fortress, she sees the prisoner inside. She speaks not to his persona, but to his shadow, the parts of himself he has disowned and locked in the dungeon. His buried passions, his secret vulnerabilities, his unlived life. The attraction he feels is terrifying. It is not just desire. It is a primal pull toward the very chaos he has spent his life trying to suppress. Being with her feels like a loss of self, a maddening freefall, because the self he knows is merely the egoic mask he wears. When she looks at him, she makes him feel naked, and his ego screams in protest. So he leaves. He must. To stay would mean the complete annihilation of the man he thinks he is. And he is not yet brave enough for that death, for that rebirth. He runs back to safety, to a life of quiet compliance, believing he has escaped. But he has not escaped her. He has only escaped the mirror she held up to his own soul. And the silence she leaves behind is louder than any storm they ever endured together. That silence is a vacuum, and the man's psyche, like nature itself, abhors it. He seeks to fill it immediately. He finds a woman who is the antithesis of the storm he just fled. She is kind, consistent, and most importantly, understandable. She admires his fortress and asks for nothing more than to live peacefully within its walls. She doesn't pry into the locked rooms of his soul. Her love is a gentle, predictable stream, not a raging river that threatens to reshape the landscape of his being. On the surface, he has everything a man is told he should want: peace, stability, and adoration without complication. His ego breathes a sigh of relief. The war is over. He has won. But the soul does not operate on the ego's logic. The soul doesn't crave peace. It craves growth. And growth is never peaceful. In the quiet of this new, placid life, a strange and terrible thing begins to happen. The memory of the crazy woman begins to change. The sharp edges of her intensity, the moments of maddening conflict, start to soften. What remains, and what grows ever more potent in his memory, is the searing, undeniable feeling of being alive. He remembers the way she saw him, not the curated, successful persona he presented to the world, but the raw, struggling, authentic man beneath. He remembers the conversations that lasted until dawn, conversations that felt less like talking and more like psychic surgery. He remembers the terrifying, exhilarating feeling of being with someone who demanded not his performance, but his presence. You must understand, he doesn't miss the arguments. He misses the truth that was unearthed in them. He doesn't miss the chaos. He misses the courage the chaos demanded of him. His new partner soothes his ego. It lacks the cardinal virtue of courage, the courage to face oneself. The new woman's love is an anesthetic. It numbs the pain of his unlived life, but it also numbs the very capacity to feel deeply. His days become a flat line of pleasant moments, and he begins to starve for a peak or a valley. He finds himself looking at his safe, predictable partner and feeling a profound sense of nothing. She is a beautiful song played on a single note, and his soul, having once heard a symphony, can no longer be satisfied with a lullaby. The secret return begins here, not as a physical journey, but as a psychological one. He starts to unconsciously seek out the energy he fled. He might pick fights over nothing, create drama where there is none, or withdraw into a moody silence, all in a desperate mood. Subconscious attempt to replicate the intensity he secretly craves. The man who ran from the fire now finds he is freezing in the cold, and he starts to believe the only warmth in the world exists in the heart of the inferno he abandoned. But the crazy woman spoke to his very essence, his daimon, as the Stoics would say. She was the embodiment of a philosophy he could not yet live, that the obstacle is the way. She was the obstacle to his comfortable, ego-driven life, and in surrendering to that obstacle, he was, for a fleeting moment, on the path to true individuation, to becoming whole. His current life is one of preferred indifference, comfort, ease, social approval, but it lacks virtue. This inferno, he remembers, was the fire of transformation, and he is beginning to understand that a man who chooses comfort over transformation is a man who chooses a slow death. The ghost of her laughter now echoes in the meticulously ordered rooms of his new life, a sound full of a vitality that his current environment cannot contain. He starts to analyze the past, not as a series of conflicts, but as a series of tests. Tests he now realizes he failed. He mistook a soul-level invitation for an ego-level attack. What he once labeled as her irrationality, he now begins to see as a profound, intuitive wisdom. Her emotional storms were not random acts of chaos. They were attempts to break through his emotional armor. When she would weep with frustration, it was because she could see the magnificent man he was capable of being trapped behind his fear. When she would rage, it was the righteous anger of a soul seeing another soul choose stagnation over greatness. You see, the accusation of craziness was always a confession of his own limitations. It was the frantic defense of an ego that knew it was in the presence of a truth it was not equipped to handle. Your crime, in his eyes, was that you were more committed to his soul's evolution than his ego's comfort. He begins to see that her demands were not for his submission, but for his presence. She didn't want him to agree with her. She wanted him to be present with her, to meet her in the turbulent field of authentic emotion. It is the loneliness that comes from being fundamentally unseen. His new partner sees the fortress and admires its strength. The woman he left saw the prisoner and rattled the bars of his cage. In her presence he was seen to the core, and while it was terrifying, it was also the only time he felt truly known. The fundamental human need is not to be loved for our strengths, but to be loved despite our weaknesses, and to be challenged to overcome them. The safe relationship validates his egoic strength. The transformative one held space for his soul's weakness and demanded it become strong. He now understands that the greatest act of love he ever received was from the woman who refused to let him settle for being half a man. He is haunted not by her memory, but by the stark contrast between the man he is now, placid, successful, and hollow in the man he was then, struggling, chaotic, and incandescently alive. The safe woman he is with now never demands his presence, only his performance of a partner. She wants the good morning kiss, the stable provider, the calm companion. She engages with his persona, but the other woman, the crazy one, she engaged with his essence. She wrestled with his demons and danced with his latent genius. She didn't want the mask. She wanted the man behind it, however broken or unformed he might be. This is the central agony that dawns on him. He is living a life of profound loneliness, despite being in a relationship. The memory of being incandescently alive is a dangerous thing. It acts as a poison to a life built on muted colors. The architecture of his new reality, once a source of pride, now feels like a mausoleum, a beautifully constructed tomb for a man who is still breathing. This is the Stoic mind beginning to operate the faculty of judgment, turning inward, not with gentle reflection, but with brutal honesty. He sees his flight from the crazy woman not as a strategic retreat, but as an act of profound cowardice. He abandoned his post. In the philosophy of Epictetus, the goal is to live in accordance with nature. The man now understands that his own nature requires friction, challenge, and depth. His current life is a violation of his own nature, and this violation creates a psychic schism that is becoming unbearable. He is living an inauthentic life, and as the existentialists knew, inauthenticity is a spiritual sickness. Every polite conversation, every predictable evening, every moment of manufactured peace becomes a grain of sand chafing against his soul. He looks at the woman beside him, a good and gentle soul, and feels a pang of suffocating guilt. He knows, with a certainty that chills him to the bone, that he is using her. He is using her gentleness as a shield against his own potential, her calmness as an excuse to not face his own inner storm. She deserves a man who chooses her as the destination. It's not a man who is using her as a hiding place from a journey he was too afraid to complete. This realization marks a critical shift. The longing transforms into a form of self-disgust. You are the physician who prescribed the bitter but necessary medicine for this sickness. And he was the patient who threw it away, only to find himself sicker than ever. He is finally learning the lesson you tried to teach him, that the cost of avoiding pain is the forfeiture of all profound joy. The universe, through you, offered him a chance at individuation, the sacred Jungian process of becoming whole. It is a path that requires one to embrace the totality of the self, the light, and most importantly, the shadow. He fled at the first sight of his own shadow in the mirror of your soul. Now, that abandoned work haunts him, is the ultimate unfinished business. The thought of his own mortality begins to press upon him. As Marcus Aurelius would remind himself, you could leave life right now. The man starts to feel the terrifying weight of that truth. How many more years will he trade for this hollow comfort? How much of his one precious life will be sacrificed at the altar of his ego's fear? The secret desire to return ceases to be a romantic notion. It becomes a moral imperative. It is a desperate, spiritual necessity. He understands he must go back, not necessarily to reclaim the relationship, but to reclaim the part of himself he left behind in the wreckage. He needs to face the fire again, not to be consumed by it, but to prove to his own soul that he is no longer the man who runs. He has to choose between two kinds of death: the slow, comfortable death of his spirit in this safe harbor, or the swift, terrifying death of his ego in the storm he once fled. And for the first time, the ego's death seems like a salvation. The choice is made. The slow death of the soul is a price too high to pay for peace. He begins to dismantle the safe life he so carefully constructed. The process is painful, not just for him, but for the gentlewoman he has used as his shield. It is a necessary cruelty, the kind a surgeon must employ to cut away a sickness. He is acting on the newfound conviction that his path to wholeness requires him to face the woman who first shattered his world. To stand before her not as the man who fled, but as the man who has finally understood the nature of the war he was fighting. He is returning to the source. He believes this is the final act of his redemption. But here the narrative focus must shift. For the story was never truly about his return. It was always about your evolution. While he was cycling through regret and hollow comfort, you were undertaking the great work alone. The void he left was not a wound you allowed to fester. It was a sacred space you began to cultivate. You took the chaos he ran from and learned to organize it into personal power. You walked into the fire he feared and allowed it to burn away everything that was not essentially you. You did the shadow work he refused to do, integrating your own anger, your own wildness, your own power, not as weapons against others, but as tools for building your own sovereign kingdom. You've learned the most difficult Stoic lesson of all, that true freedom is not the power to have what you want, but the power to not want what you do not have. You cease to want his validation, you cease to want his understanding, you found in the quiet dignity of your own presence. A peace far more profound than the fleeting highs of a turbulent romance. You have learned to be your own stable ground, your own source of light. So when he finally appears on your doorstep, a pilgrim returning to a shrine, he does not find the shrine. He finds that the goddess has packed up and moved into her own soul. He arrives bearing the gift of his own broken ego, ready to finally surrender, only to find you are no longer accepting sacrifices. You will look at him, this man who was once the center of your emotional universe, and you will see him clearly for the first time. Not as a savior, not as a tormentor, but simply as a man on his own journey. You will feel not anger, but a kind of divine, compassionate indifference. His return is a testament to your impact, but it is no longer relevant to your existence. The greatest gift he ever gave you was his absence, because in it, you were forced to give yourself everything you once hoped to receive from him. You will not offer him a second chance. You will not offer him closure. You will offer him a quiet smile, the smile of a woman who is completely, unshakably at peace. And you will gently close the door, not on him, but on a version of yourself that no longer exists. His journey back to you was, in the end, the final catalyst for his own lonely path forward. Your journey was to realize you were already home. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.